So Grandmaster Nightfalls are upon us. And you might be wondering, Cross, what builds should we be using this season? Well, fellas, look no further, because in front of us today is a number of very, very nasty builds that's going to be bringing the heat, or in this case, the lightning. Now, what is the Nightfall lineup for this season? Guys, it's pretty stacked. Now, I understand this is based on the master modifiers, but they will probably translate over to the Grandmaster versions. Every single strike this season, though, is Arc Burn, except Glassway. Glassway is Void Burn, which sounds kind of miserable. But the Glassway, acute Void Burn with Overload and Barrier champions. You taste the Rainbow for shields. Light Blade, acute Arc Burn with Barrier and Unstoppable champions. Shields being Arc and Solar. Fallen Saber also being acute Arc Burn with Overload and Barrier. Shields you'll be facing is Arc and Void. The Disgrace, also Arc Burn. Champions being Barrier and Unstoppable. Tasting the Rainbow on shields. Exodus Crash, Arc Burn as well with Overload and Barrier as champions. The only shields you'll be running against in this one is Solar. The Devil's Lair, also acute Arc Burn with Overload and Barrier champions, and shields being Taste the Rainbow. That's right, guys. Every single Nightfall this season will have Arc Burn, meaning Bungie wants you to use Arc. And almost every single strike has some kind of bonus to Arc and Stasis subclasses. Either Lightning Crystals to boost Arc and Stasis ability regeneration, or Cosmic Superconductor, which increases super regeneration for Arc and Stasis. Needless to say, either Arc or Stasis is probably going to be the way to go for most of your builds this season, which is why we're going to be taking advantage of both of those with both the burn and the modifier. That being said, it is always nice to have a Warlock on your team with Well of Radiance, so we can't count solo Warlocks out, especially with builds like Starclass. Now, we would be insane to not recommend Arc Titans with Heart of Inmost Light. Heart of Inmost Light remains to be one of the best Titan exotics in the game. We had a Lord of Thunder build. The ability regeneration is second to none. It completely makes multiple of the Titan exotics irrelevant, and please, for the love of God, Bungie, don't nerf it. Now, with that being said, the Titan GM recommendation this season is still our Lord of Thunder build. This build utilizes Heart of Inmost Light. You pair it with Arc 3.0 aspect Touch of Thunder, and it blows the competition away in terms of damage and the endless storm grenades that are hitting for over 270,000 damage each. Now, this is, of course, when you pair it with things like Spark of Shock, Spark of Magnitude. These are the things that really amplify. Also, if you happen to decide to rock Surge Detonators with this build, one grenade will make short work of Overload champions, as you can stun and kill an Overload champion with just one storm grenade on master level content. Add in mods like Elemental Ordnance and Bountiful Wells to generate Arc Wells, Seeking Wells to get those to track to you, combined with Ashes to Assets for super regeneration, Bolster and Detonation for class ability regeneration, and Lightning Strikes twice for increased grenade regeneration. This build takes ability spam and regeneration to the max. Not only is Heart of Inmost Light granting you increased ability regeneration and buffing your ability damage by 35% at ×2 in power, you combine that regeneration with the regen we get from our mods, plus the ability and super regeneration you get from Nightfall modifiers like Cosmic Superconductor and Lightning Crystals, you really start to witness what the endless ability loop looks like. And if you don't want to rock Surge Detonators, you can pair all this with Thunderlord, which now has intrinsic overload, plus a catalyst that reloads the gun every time it creates lightning strikes. This is one, if not the best build combinations for GMs this season. Now, our recommendation for all of these builds is to rock tier 10 resilience, especially in Grandmasters where everything can literally poop on you. And if you happen to rock things like thermal shock plating, and hell, you can even rock 2 of those, this is going to add even more to your tankiness. Again, if you're interested in our full breakdown of this build, a link to that will be in the description below, as well as our other builds. Now, for our hunters, you're up next. Now, our recommendations for hunters this season is a bit of a unique one that we think will not only change up the monotony of hunter builds, but will also provide support in terms of ag control and orb generation. So for hunters, we recommend the second version of our Dance Upon a Star build. Now, the first version of this build actually included Radiant Dance Machines, but because those require you to be close to enemies, we're swapping those out and we'll be taking advantage of 6 Coyote instead. Now, this build focuses on super regeneration and ag control. You'll be able to get your super insanely fast with this build, allowing you to pop a Deadfall Tether very often, which will generate orbs for your fire team and weaken and suppress enemies. The way this build works is that we use 6 Coyotes perk, which provides us with an extra dodge, in tandem with Reaping Wellmaker, which generates a Void Well on weapon kills after a dodge. And the idea is dodge once, get a kill to spawn a well, but do that twice to generate 2 wells. You'll be able to do this relatively easily at a distance because we're using Wishender as our exotic weapon, as Wishender is hitting very hard now thanks to Broadhead perk, and it has intrinsic anti-barrier. We actually did a damage comparison here, and you're looking at 34,000 damage per arrow and 26,000 damage max per arrow against champions. So almost rivaling that of Arbalest. And on top of that, since we have the artifact mod Thunder and Glare, you can pair this with Wishender to proc that debuff, as you'll be weakening enemies from a distance. Now, once you generate Void Wells after dodging and getting kills with Wishender, you'll have 30 seconds to pick up those wells before they disappear thanks to Enduring Wells. And once you do, you'll be charged with light ×4. And then you want to throw your Vortex Grenade at a group of enemies. This will proc Energy Converter, and you'll consume those stacks of charge with light, granting you an extremely large chunk of super energy, as long as you do this before you've reached 25% of your super charge. charge. Now, the grenade you threw will also generate super energy on kills thanks to double access to assets, allowing you to get close to almost 2 bars of super regenerated instantly if performed correctly. On top of that, Wish Ender hits 3 times per arrow, meaning it's generating more super per shot, similar to how Outbreak Perfected works with nanites. Again, if you want a complete breakdown of this one, down below in the description will be a link to that. Now, moving on to Warlocks. Warlocks, we've got a build for both solar and stasis. First, let's hit up solar. We're going back to our Starclass build because it is still so good. This build uses Well of Radiance, Empowering Rift, Fusion Grenades, and Starfire Protocol. And I know we don't have solar burn, but just stay with me. With the focus of keeping you and your team alive, insane grenade recharge rates for near infinite grenade spam, and lots of solar ignitions and increased grenade damage. With Starfire Protocol, while you're in your Empowering Rift, kills will regenerate your class ability energy, granting you and your Empowering Rift back again. Any Empower kills will also be feeding you Fusion Grenade energy, so long as you're inside of an Empowering Rift or a Well of Radiance. And yes, this applies to your teammates' Well of Radiance or Empowering Rifts. You'll be able to grenade spam all day long, considering Starfire Protocol also grants you a second grenade charge. More grenades means more scorch stacks, especially when you're rocking Ember of Ashes. You can get those ignitions off much quicker and much more often. Add on Ember of Eruption, and you're looking at an increased area of effect for ignitions. Not to mention the Touch of Flame aspect in Ember of Blistering, which will make our fusion grenades explode twice, causing more scorch stacks, creating more ignitions, which will directly feed back into our fusion grenade regeneration thanks to Ember of Blistering. There is so much grenade regeneration and solar damage going on here, and even though we don't have classy restoration from last season, Starfire Protocol and Starclass in general is still so good. Throw on things like Wither Horde, Explosive Well Maker, and Bountiful Wells. All of this will be feeding into your synergy for more ability regeneration, generating solar wells, which Wither Horde can produce as well, granting you health. And since Wither Horde does damage over time, if you're standing inside of an Empowering Rift, each one of those ticks of damage will regenerate more Fusion Grenade energy. Now, you can also throw on Infernal Whip, which is a mod from the seasonal artifact, which will allow your solar melee abilities to stun unstoppable champions. And again, even though we have arc burns pretty much for every Nightfall and void burn for Glassway, Well of Radiance is still a great super to use, as it just keeps your team alive in so many sticky situations. Again, a link to that build will be down below. Now, for our Stasis Warlock build, I do want to cover Stasis because even though Glassway has void as its burn, and we're probably going to attempt it both ways, Stasis is one of the best ways to run that Nightfall, especially for GMs like Glassway. It's still as potent as ever, locking down points and providing means of a getaway if needed, and it's also going to benefit from lightning crystals and cosmic superconductor modifiers present on 5 of the 6 Nightfalls this season, providing increased Stasis ability and super regeneration. The ability regen modifier will make this build even better, as we'll be relying on the Osmiomancy gloves and turning our cold snap grenades into stasis turrets, aka Stacy. You're able to achieve this with the Bleak Watcher aspect. Osmiomancy gives us a second cold snap charge, but we won't be using the cold snap grenades as actual grenades. Instead, we're just going to be converting them into stasis turrets so they can work autonomously. This will allow us to lock down lanes, and you can literally leave them on the sides here. So when those wyverns or anything tries to push you from your flanks, Stacy's got you covered. Now, you're going to be using Glacial Harvest combined with Elemental Shards. This creates stasis shards when freezing targets and allows those stasis shards to count as stasis elemental wells, which will not only feed into ability regeneration, but also make us charge with light thanks to elemental charge. We even got Whisper of Conduction so that those stasis shards will track to you and you don't gotta go and pick them up for yourself. Now, what are we doing with our stacks of charge with lights? We're making use of firepower here, which will consume 1 stack of charge with lights when we throw a grenade, granting us grenade ability energy depending on how many firepower mods we have slotted. Now, for this particular build, we have 3, so that each grenade or turret that we throw will grant us 40% of our grenade right back. And you can see where this gets really wild. You can literally have turrets everywhere. And that's the point here. You want to freeze lock anything that can possibly kill you. And you can actually get up to 4 turrets at one time if you play this right. And that's just for one person. Imagine an entire team of Stasis Warlocks. And yes, we've been that team before. Glassway was hell until we discovered Stacy, and it made it so much easier. With Lightning Crystals modifier being active this season, I think this build is just going to be a no-brainer for things like Glassway. Again, guys, for a complete breakdown of all of these builds, down below in the description will be links to all of them, as well as dim links if you just want to plug and go. With that being said, we will be putting out guides on these Grandmasters week to week. We'll probably just show some live footage today of us running these Nightfalls, but I do like to do breakdowns every single week because we have things like double Nightfall loot, we have new Nightfall loot, and then on top of that, we just get better at these Nightfalls. Like, I know we've done things like Lightblade before, Fallen Saber multiple times, Exodus Crash, Devil's Lair, even Glassway. The thing is though, as you do them over the season, you get substantially better in comparison to that first run. You start reaching those sub 10-minute runs, and this makes a big difference when you're trying to go for that specific piece of gear, or even if you're just going for materials. Regardless, Grandmasters, some of my favorite content in the the game. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.